Well, hi.
Hi, I'm Allison with List Self Storage and StoreTrack, and we are joined today by Chris Oosthuizen, Alan Takle, John Lindsey, and John McGlynn, and we're discussing the global market for self-storage. So just getting started, I'd like everyone to go around and kind of just give a little bit of information about your background and tell us what time zone you're in. So Chris, can you get started with that for us?
Alison, Chris Oosthuizen, your pronunciation was perfect, thank you. I'm in Johannesburg at the moment in South Africa, the Chief Marketing Officer for Stor-Age Property REIT Limited. We operate 55 stores in South Africa and 30 in the UK. We also have a digital marketing agency called Digital First. And as I said, middle of the day, so 12 o'clock here in Johannesburg.
Cool. Alan, how about you?
Yeah, Alan Takle. I'm in Melbourne, Australia. It's 8 o'clock at night at the moment. I've just got all the kids and the puppy off to bed. So we're looking forward for a quiet night. We've got two specialties. I've been in property development since the mid-90s and also have an estate agency background. And we also have a digital and creative marketing business that's been involved in marketing some substantial assets for the storage industry. But more specifically, we've been doing our feasibilities over the last 18 months with a view to entering the market at an institutional level.
Great. John Lindsey.
Good morning, everyone. It is 6 a.m. here in North Carolina. I'm the co-founder and president of Lindsey Self-Storage Group. Family's been in the storage business for over 50 years, and we do brokerage throughout the US, Europe, and Asia. Glad we could get all my favorite people on one Zoom this morning.
And then John McGlynn.
Good morning, John McGlynn here, based in Monaco, currently 12 noon. And as you can probably tell from the accent, I'm an international Scot. Scottish Capital is my kind of holding company that we do all of our investing through. Our biggest investments remain the storage and workspace sector. So we do things a bit differently from most people in the industry. We have Storage Vault, which is our storage brand, and Co-Vault, which is our workspace brand. And quite often we'll go for bigger complexes and have these two businesses coexisting on the same site, sometimes even in the same building. Other than that, we've got crypto investing. We're launching a new bank in the UK, lots of property stuff, some lithium mining investments, biotech. So quite a diverse mixed bag of stuff that we get up to that keeps me busy and out of trouble. And except when I'm out with John Lindsey somewhere.
I feel like
everyone can agree with that.
Said allegations.
That's very cool. All right, I'm just going to get it started. So on a macro level, we'll just, Alan, if you can get us started, what trends are you seeing in your region?
Yeah, so Australia is an interesting bag in that we've got the majority of our population around the East Coast and Southeast. And we've got this big red centre of Australia where there's not a lot of population in there. So at a macro level, what we're seeing is we're seeing the institutional guys and the REITs going through a process of consolidation and purchasing a lot of the mum and dad outfits that meet their criteria. But we're also seeing a lot of smaller storage facilities regionally in towns that might only have populations of 15 or 20,000 that are being developed by mum and dad operations. So we've got this two-speed storage economy really going on, where you've got the big guys that are making some big plays, and then you've also got the mum and dad investors that are getting into it. And also Australia is a little bit different in that we've got 12,500 head of population facility, which is obviously very different to other areas around the world. So we've got a lot of space and room for growth over here.
That's great. John Lindsey, can you share?
Yeah, so I think like the rest of the world, we have had our craziest 3 years of self-storage ever in the history of existence. And Allison, as if you've seen, it's been record prices, record cap rates, record deals sold, record volume on every level, billions of dollars worth of transactions over the past 18 months. This year in particular, it's very interesting because the 10-year treasury note has risen so quickly over the past 30 days that we have seen debt shift tremendously. I think a lot of buyers have started to put their pencils down. We've started to see a slowing of certain acquisitions, more so in tertiary markets. There are still record deals being done and record number of offers on assets, but we're starting to finally see the brakes pumped just a little bit. We're seeing price reductions for the first time since 2019. We're seeing groups start to delay a call for offers date to try and get a couple more offers in at the last minute. But on the flip side of that, there are a number of groups that went out and raised, $500 million, $750 million last year, and they're still looking to deploy that through this year. And I think groups will try and push through this hyper compressed yield market, and we're going to have another record year of transactions being done. Ultimately, we'll see what that looks like on the back end for these groups in 5 to 7 years. Is a 25, 50 bip swing on the front end going to radically change your deal over that time frame? We'll see. But I think we're still going to have a very, very busy year. Again, healthy amount of transactions. And I think the bigger buyers will kind of push through this new rate environment we're seeing today and the continued rate hikes the Fed has promised throughout the end of the year.
So well said. John McGlynn, how about you?
Well, the UK market, for those who don't know it, it's really, people think the UK is 4 countries. It's actually 2 for storage. It's called Greater London and then everything else. Inside Greater London, the REITs, as you would expect, dominate the show there. Almost no opportunities for independents. Prices are just ridiculous in those markets. When we look at the everywhere else, the REITs are trying to buy as much as they can, but there's really so little for sale because generally speaking, all self-storage is doing well. Occupancy is high, rates are high, and there's very, very few transactions to benchmark pricing on. Same as John was saying, yield compression, etc., and values are going crazy. But small island with tough planning restrictions, getting sites is the #1 challenge. And I know everyone in every market says that, but in the UK it's a big problem. And people in self-storage know that the perfect site is on a major highway with a McDonald's or a Starbucks or a gas station or something next to you. And for those of you who may have saw, I put a recent LinkedIn post up saying these sites don't exist. So we had to go and buy a 6-7 acre site, sell a plot to Starbucks, sell a plot to a gas station so that we could have the perfect storage vault and co-vault site. And that's the kind of innovation that I really think our industry is going to have to think about moving forward, because to go and buy that dream plot that's just perfect on a main road, they are very, very rare.
It's interesting, though, that you bring up like McDonald's, because you're kind of competing with McDonald's, and no one does site selection better than
100%, and that's the problem. So
yeah,
we saw this one opportunity, and to be fair, we bought that site like 4 or 5 years ago. There's major infrastructure works, new roads, roundabouts, substation for electricity. I mean, it was a real pain, but the site is going to be a good site, and we're currently analysing, do we have the appetite to do lots of them, or do we just maybe do one at a time? But getting sites is certainly our biggest challenge.
Wow, that's interesting. Chris, what about you? What are you seeing?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Self-storage is so homogenous, and you listen to opinions from across the globe, and everyone's nodding their heads, and we understand that. Deurbanization is quite interesting for us at the moment. So seeing a few trends kicking in, sort of in line with that, what Alan was saying, with individuals moving to regionalized environments. Self-storage where potentially it wouldn't have been justified 2, 3, 4 years back. COVID's kicked people off the proverbial ledge, and giving them the opportunity to really operate and function from a work from home space or work from anywhere, effectively creating a lot smaller facilities in regional nodes. So we're seeing little villages with 20,000 square feet facilities, which is tiny, kicking up, that are sort of semi-manned, not unmanned, but semi-manned. So sort of I'll be there one day a week and come sign you all up. So it's a really different model, and it's interesting to see it. Also, I guess that the physical drive-by, just off based on what John was saying, but we're seeing that digital drive-by playing a far more important role in that cycle of customer acquisition. So how the consumer is shopping for self-storage, that competitive space pre-website, and drawing that comparison there, and sort of giving people their advantage on a regionalized basis to really fight with the REITs. So effectively, self-storage is a localized player, as we all know, and a self-storage manager in the right place that knows the region well can take on any REIT in terms of their budgets even. So it's interesting to see, where COVID's going to land. We're not quite sure, but what it's looking like at the moment is very positive.
That's great. Jess just joined as well. Can you tell us a little bit about your background in storage, and then also what trends you're seeing in the industry and what time zone you're in?
What, me?
Yes, please.
Yeah, sorry. Hi, everyone. Yeah, sorry I'm late. I told you I was going to be in it. I told you I was going to be in and out, and that now I'm in. Soon I'll be out.
You look like a bar, Jess. Is that in and out of the bar?
I am. I'm serving wine, and actually I had a glass of wine quickly, which was nice, which is why I was late. No, well, what time zone? I'm in Singapore, so it is. It's post 5 o'clock, so you can officially drink. It's 6:15 in the evening here.
We're gonna get along so well.
But I'm okay. Don't worry about it. No. What else? I am Singapore is opening up. It's everything is pretty much back to normal, which is a little bit of a surprise to us here, because we've been Singapore is good at micromanaging any situation, and COVID has been very much a managed situation, but fairly well managed. I would say you can pick bones with any country in the world really about what could have been done better, but a fairly hard lockdown, and then when things really got bad later on, then they didn't panic too much and have been good at saying, okay, now they've got the vaccines rolled out, and we're now able to, you open up and you live with it. So that's the brief, and that's good. In terms of self-storage, listen, we, like many other places, we did very well. A lot of it's Asia is, as you know, very space crammed, multi-generational households in many cases, and working from home had a lot of effect on free up all the stuff from my house so that we can work from home. And they did that to a large extent. So we had a huge wave of interest in self-storage from COVID. And it's interesting, when you talk about what are the drivers of self-storage, you ask the consultants, it's all the D's, the death and destruction and drama and what else they come up with, which is all crap in my book. The drivers of self-storage is change. It is when people, when there's a change in your life, you consider your space situation. When you consider your space situation, self-storage is one of the drivers that you should think of. And whether it's a change in season, or it's a change in economy, or you get divorced, or you get all those whatever happens in your life, but it's a change factor that happens. And COVID was a huge change, and it was good for us. And now it becomes another change as COVID goes away and you go back to normality, or the new normality, call it what you want. And then it becomes like, what now? What are we going to do? How is that going to impact us? Is everybody going to run in and take all their boxes out and we lose a lot of customers? There will be some of that, but we also know, right, that once people have moved in, it's hard for them to move out. So yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
that's what's going on here.
See a massive vacancy following COVID. I live in sweatpants now, and my laundry is always done. Like I've been training for this my whole life. It's not going to change,
Guys, can I, if you don't mind, Alice, can I ask people a question just to follow up on Jess's point there? I'm really keen on what people's views are. The real credit crunch and inflation squeeze in the UK is coming on rapidly, pretty hard, and with interest rates apparently are going to, if they've not, it's probably been announced, but we're going to go up another 0.5 point. With inflation where it is, I think we're going to see a real squeeze on, the cost of living crisis. I'm just wondering what the view is around the world on how that's impacting people and how you think it's going to affect self-storage, because, whilst in COVID, everybody moved everything out of their garage to create the mini gym or the kids' playground or whatever, and it's difficult to make the choice to move things back and remove that new room. When you've got bills and, you're like, obviously in the sunnier places, it's not as bad, but we live in a cold country, and even the energy crisis with Ukraine and everything. And I just think we're going to have so many curveballs coming at us in the next 6 to 12 months. Interested in people's views on how they think that may impact, or am I being a bit too cautious?
No, that's such a great question.
Yeah, John, I think you hit the nail on the head. There are a lot of curveballs coming down the pike. And, like you said, we're having the same thing here with our 10-year in the States. And obviously it's always a moving target with Ukraine. But it comes down to, how heavy is that squeeze? And what is that pain point for people to be forced in that move out position? But I think you have to balance that with the idea that Allison just said, how many people are fully remote now, by requirement or by choice, or, have a setup, an establishment with a routine now with a new nanny or new schedule with kids, or drop off and pick up, or maybe their office just closed entirely. So I would find it hard to see a mass exodus. And even if we did see a large exit of people, tenants in the US, we had such a big COVID bump to begin with that, I think it might even just kind of settle back down to pre-COVID occupancy levels, which, again, was a strong place to be in the first place. And, there will be losers through this process. I think, if a store is in lease up in a hyper competitive market or in an oversaturated market to begin with, yeah, they might have issues. But on the whole, I think existing facilities or those that are in undersaturated markets will do extremely well. The same goes, like we're doing a lot of deals in France and the Netherlands right now. They face the similar things you mentioned in the UK. And I think those being such undersupplied markets will push right through this. Same in Vietnam, working on some deals there. It's such just an undersaturated market. There's so much demand, and that there's a lot of ebb and flow. Whereas in the States, those newer stores really might feel that pressure on a micro level.
I kind of want to carry that conversation over about just the development pipeline in your region as well. Your average lease up period, cost to build, what unique barriers to entry there might be. John Lindsey, can you kind of keep it going there?
Yeah, so in the US, we've seen record construction for the past decade, but particularly the past 3 years through COVID. Supply chain is the hot button topic all over the world. But it is crazy. I mean, price of lumber went up, threefold in the past year. Steel's up. I'd say average cost to build a facility in the US, you're looking somewhere around $80 a foot. If you want to go multi-story class A, it could be anywhere from $100 to $120, depending on quality of product you're building. If you're doing stone facades or, all the bells and whistles. But it is a major driver here in the US construction still, especially, the Bible Belt. You look at the mass migration out of states like California, New York, Oregon, and everyone has flocked to the Texas and Floridas of the world. They love what's going on there. The weather's great. COVID, you can work remote. So we're seeing this huge influx of construction in major markets, but there's also a massive population trend growth. So I think it's a bit of a moving target as far as what saturation is and the Tampa and the Raleigh Durhams of the world. But I think we're going to see that trend continue for a long time there. And I don't really have many major concerns about saturation in those markets, just due to how much attention we're getting right now. And I don't see that slowing anytime soon.
And people are still very successful, right, in development in the US. So it's yeah. John McGlynn, what about you?
Sorry, I missed that.
Oh, in terms of development, I mean, lots of development in the UK right now. So I'd be curious just to see what you're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, back to the site shortage, there's massive shortages, but what you find is the REITs seem to be building their pipeline, like I guess most international markets where they're just building up the land bank. For the independents, very, very tough. I mean, what we tend to do is we'll buy older buildings, like old cash and carry buildings or old industrial parks, and effectively strip those back to the steel portal frame. So effectively we are getting a brand new building, because, you know, the steel frame's always fine, but you've got a brand new development. The big trend that we're seeing in the UK is with shipping containers. Now, I don't want to talk down shipping container owners because I've got a lot of friends who have some of those sites. But I would say, in my opinion, and it's only my view, the majority of shipping container sites are not really up to proper self-storage standards. There's some brilliant sites and there's some brilliant operators, but I'm concerned that we're seeing a trend where you've got not quite the farmer's field with muddy paths to get to them and old rusty shipping containers, but there's such a wide diverse, and I think it's something the industry's got to get a grip on, because, you know, if you've got...
You see a lot of that, John, in Japan. I mean, that's traditionally been a container market, and it's been for many years. And yeah, it was right from the beginning. It was always a container, outdoor container, temporary occupancy permit on a plot of land. You put down a container and people put their stuff in there, and that's how self-storage was in Japan. And then it became like when Kura started about 20 years ago and sort of upgraded the whole experience and took it indoor, if you will. And then they went really high scale, right, upscale, because they took and converted ex-office buildings in downtown Tokyo, which were it was a derelict business office supplier, and they upgraded those and strengthened the floors and did everything to accommodate storage. And now you have really impressive downtown, upmarket, upscale sites. But it started very much with a container solution. And therefore there's been, so the association, the Japan Self-Storage Association, is a merger of two associations, the Container Association and the indoor self-storage association.
Yeah, that's
interesting. But to continue on that, I mean, it started with containers in that market, but there is a role, I think, certainly in certain markets where the climate can accommodate outdoor storage, you know, through the seasons, etc. In Singapore, where I am, you could never do that because whatever you put in a container will melt if you leave it there for, you know, any period of time. But in other markets where you have a fairly temperate climate, I do think that you need to recognize there is an opportunity for such a market.
Yeah, Australia's like that. We've got a lot of container facilities, and some of them have recently transacted at very compressed yield rates. And as you say, because our climate is so even, and we've seen now Australia move to more purpose-built facilities where they're building a warm shell and then they're having a very high-quality fit-out through that. And that goes for both drive-up and walk-up facilities. The mums and dads we've found regionally are still developing with containers because they're very cheap. They're cheap to deploy and they're quick.
Thing is, they're not that cheap anymore. You know, the price of containers has gone through the roof, but then again, so is traditional building. I mean, we've copied the US drive-up units, and we've got a lot of our sites now where we've got in the banks and terraces, but these things are steel frame construction, you know, 70 mil insulated cladding, the same kind of micro rib stuff that Mercedes use in their showrooms. And, you know, our take on it is we just want to always offer a five-star product if we possibly can. And, you know, you're right, Jess, there's people who like to stay in five-star hotels and there's people who like to stay in youth hostels. And I guess storage is no different to the hotel industry in that regard, but I'm not convinced that any association around the world has actually nailed how we sell that concept to the customer. I know that Dean Booty on his podcast, for those who listen to it, he always makes a reference to the hotel model. And I actually think he's onto something there. You know, within self-storage, you've got a five-star hotel, you've got a four-star, and, you know, right down to possibly a one-star. And as an industry,
and that's okay. Then it's up to you as an operator to say, are you a brand that can expand over several, from a 3-star to a 5-star? Or do you position yourself uniquely in one end? That's just 100%. Up to you, right?
Yeah.
But back to your original question. Sorry, John, your original question, right? What happens now with cap or with increase in interest rates? You've got inflation going on around the world. Cost of borrowing is obviously going to go up, etc. I think you're going to see an adjustment to the cap rate assumption. So buying in, if you're in expansion mode, then you need to sort of, okay, hang on, what's going on in the world now? Make sure you don't overpay. So this is a bargaining tool if you're in an expansion mode. I wouldn't sell right now because there will be a cautionary higher, they'll put half a point or a point on the exit cap rate assumption, right? So you're not going to get the same price that you did 2 months ago. You're just not.
Yeah.
But okay, so that's fine. There are peaks and valleys. Now is maybe the time to go out and secure some other assets and use that as a bargaining point. And there will be people that will be squeezed because of the cost of stuff, right? The cost of debt, etc. In terms of the consumer, is there still a need for self-storage? I go back to my original point. It's just another change. This is now people need to change. You upscale or downscale in your life. Storage is part of that.
Yeah.
And so I'm not so worried about that. I mean, there will be challenges, but I'm not too worried about it.
We weren't fully in the storage business in 2008, but we did have storage facilities within what I would call the Covalt brand. And what we found is in the last recession, we actually did very well because we were offering what people regarded as budget space. And you had offices, lawyers, accountants, professionals moving out of city centre office space that they had, for example, their file room before we all went on to electronic records. And they're saying, we can rent our file room with you much cheaper. So, maybe the storage industry will do even better through these difficult times, but who knows?
Chris, do you have anything? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I would say, Chris, I'm curious, in South Africa, have you guys seen these similar trends with some of the sites?
Yeah, it's just interesting listening to the gents. It's from a consumer perspective, we talk a lot about passive products. So we talk about self-storage, life-changing, life-altering events. As Jess was saying, these life-changing events cause the need for self-storage, quite often directly connected to the residential moving sector. It was a significant part of our business. What we're seeing is a lot of active use of the product. So not necessarily self-storage, but effectively call it micro warehousing or the like, effectively a small warehouse. It's 100 square feet, it's city center stuff. It's being actively used 7, 8, 9 times a day, sometimes the entire day. And it's a fundamental shift in the way the product was designed to what it's being used for by the consumer. Now I'm finding some of our facilities with 50+% occupancy on the commercial basis. Now, even the likes of COVID causing life-changing events, again, coming down, but even the business side, those businesses are changing and shifting. People are starting new businesses. We're very used to an inflationary environment in South Africa, so we understand how to respond to it. So it's quite normal for us, rightfully or wrongfully so. But even in the space that we're in at the moment, we're seeing a lot of new green shoots in the business space. So entrepreneurs are coming through, they're starting new businesses, they're using self-storage as that launch platform. Maybe it's 200 square feet, after 2 or 3 years, and they're actually realizing that they can operate their business without long-term commercial leases. Because they just can't get real estate in a better location than what we can offer them in our store. So, we're very positive on the South African market. We've got a nice runway on our development pipeline in the market here. We're also very positive on the UK market. We feel there's a few good opportunities there. John, obviously in the American market, the supply there is quite significant, and the consumer understanding is as significant. So that if you ask a consumer what self-storage is, they'll be able to tell you pretty quickly. You ask a consumer in the UK, you might get 1 or 2 answers if they've got a real understanding or not. In South Africa, maybe it's 1 in 8. So just that also consumer understanding, and that in itself is an opportunity for us to still bring a fair bit of supply to market.
That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point on the active versus passive, because we deal a lot in that too. And I think there's a real change in consumer behavior, and then also in operator behavior. You got to understand you're dealing with somebody who's using it in a different way now. It used to be the old, just put it away and hopefully they'll forget about it. Keep paying the bill, but please don't come and visit your stuff, because when you visit it, you'll find you don't really need it. That was the old traditional model. It's not like that anymore. This is this is an extension of your home, or it's even work related. So, you know, it's used all the time. And that makes a different demand on us as operators in terms of the staff, because the staff engagement is entirely different if you got people visiting the stuff 6 times a day versus once every 6 months, right? So your facility needs to be different. The supporting infrastructure, coffee machines, meeting rooms, live stream facilities, whatever it may be, branding, all kinds of things need to be different to accommodate that. I think that's an excellent point.
I have a question about that then, I guess. That's really unique, but I would like to know any other kind of nuances in your region. Joss, what are you seeing that don't apply, I guess, at the global level?
But so I'm very much of the same view that we're trying to go from a passive to an active product, right? And the regulators in Singapore and in other markets in Asia are very much seeing it as, we allowed you to do storage. Now, storage in our mind is you put your stuff in there and that's it. Now, if you come and do, like, what if you're an e-commerce trader, a small entrepreneurial setup, and you need to go and visit your stuff and even trade on this stuff daily, in and out, and package it and sell it? You know, you need to have access to last mile delivery. You maybe need to promote it. You need to have an attractive space where you can show off your product. You can't do it in the self-storage room. We're all idiots here, so we love the product, but it's not the most attractive space in the world. So you need somewhere where you can elegantly put, you know, show your shoes or whatever the hell it is you got in there, right? You need facilities to do that. You need good internet for that. You need meeting facilities. You need packaging facilities. You need partners with last mile delivery kind of things, right? You maybe, do you want to put a desk in your storage space and sit and work there for 3 hours a day? It's not for that kind of space. So maybe you just move the desk outside and you have maybe a co-working setup to complement that kind of stuff, right? So it becomes a live business. And I am very much trying to drive that forward. But the regulators are like, well, hang on, we were told you wanted to do storage. I say, it's still a storage product. It's just an active storage product. My argument with them is very much along the lines of, imagine if you were the regulator for phones, there would never be an iPhone because you're not making calls on it. You have a phone license, make a call on it. But a phone today, the call is the least thing you do on it. You still call it a phone, but you don't make calls on it. You send messages and you take pictures, you view pictures, you share. We all know what we do, right? But to make a call is almost the least thing you do on your phone these days. So to have regulators decide what we can and cannot do doesn't make sense, unfortunately.
I agree with you, Jess, wholeheartedly. If someone calls me, they must be dying. Otherwise,
oh my gosh, right?
Exactly.
I look at my phone and think, how dare you?
I'll remember not to call you, John.
Yeah, but it is funny.
That's a really interesting point. I'm not sure what the planning regs are over in Singapore, but in the UK, we have I think it's called Class 6, and that actually covers general industrial use, warehousing, distribution, storage. It's virtually everything except retail. And I had this conversation with a director of planning in one of the cities that we operate, and I was sitting in his office, and I said to him, Michael, this is clearly an office. He went, yeah. I said, if we removed your desk and everything out this office and we put filing cabinets floor to ceiling, if somebody walked past, would they call it an office or would they call it a storage room or a file room? He said, well, one of the latter. I said, okay, what if we moved all those filing cabinets out and there's nothing in this room, and we put in a bench with a vice on it, and you've got maybe a silversmith and someone who's skilled and they're making like craft jewelry or something? Would you call it an office? Would you call it a storage room, or would you call it workspace? And what we try and do at all of our sites now is get the widest possible planning use, that 1 month we can have a storage room, someone moves out of that space. If they put a desk in, it becomes an office, but it's still broadly called workspace. And, you know, we try and get that. We've been doing that successfully since 2016, 2017. And
so it's interesting in the US where we don't see that type of product use with our normal units. Zoning just wouldn't allow for that in a lot of spaces. But what we have seen a lot more development of is those smaller contractor spaces, There's certainly been a higher demand for that. The high-end car park condos, the 200 square foot, have your own door access with a plug in it. And so we've seen some of those start to be built out, or more of those retail office flex spaces in front of the storage facility. But I think the zoning is fairly prohibitive as far as people having a desk in your storage unit or things like that. And I don't think facility operators would be too warm to that. But we are seeing a lot of investors talking about running an e-commerce business out of there, or we see like drop off and pick up for a food distributor or a satellite dish company, that drop off and pick up. So we do see a lot of that small contractor, small business stuff, but I don't think we've seen as much of the shared co-working and self-storage sector in one here in the US.
I think it's difficult to do conversions. I think it's one of those things. We were lucky that when we got into the market, we identified 3 broad areas: small office space, which is before co-working became fully on trend, what we would call studios, which the layperson would say is like a converted single or double garage unit, like the drive-up units. And for us anyway, we looked at it, but I think the first conference I went to was in Stockholm, and all the gurus on the stage were telling us that they got to 75% occupancy. Average was 40,000. The occupancy was 30,000, and yet they kept building 40,000 square foot stores. And I'm thinking to myself, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different outcome. These are supposed to be the smart people of our industry. And we actually went and brainstormed and said, we need to come up with a plan B for that 10,000 square feet, because if we build 40,000, we ain't any smarter than these guys who've been doing it for 20 years. We're going to get 30,000 of storage. What's that hybrid product that we put into the last 10? And that's, I'm not going to say we sat and designed the whole thing, but that was the accidental way that we stumbled into the Cobalt brand. And it works super well.
Chris, what about you? Any kind of nuances more specific to your region that don't apply at a global level?
Well, I mean, Alison, so we've got obviously our portfolio in South Africa and the one in the UK, and then we manage clients in Spain, Italy, Ireland, and 1 or 2 other places. So I think it's always so interesting for me to see how homogenous the product really is. So I'm hearing what John Lindsey's saying in the US, I'm hearing what's happening in Singapore, and it's actually the same thing, whether the operator realizes it or not. People are operating out those stores, and that trend is carrying across those markets. So it really is interesting to see how that consumer shift, that global consumer shift, sort of carries across multiple markets. The one thing that is coming to fruition is that every market seems to have a market leader that sets the tone for unit size. It's not to John McGlynn's product, is the clever people in the room saying your average size must be in market X, it's got to be 50 square feet or 100 square feet, and then everyone sort of builds it off there. I was looking at one market in particular a couple of weeks ago, and the average size they've got in square meter basis, 5 square meter, 50 square feet, which is really, really small. And I asked, but why do you have a 50 square foot average size? Well, that's what everyone does. Now, the churn on that facility is very similar to the churn in our facilities, and it's interesting to see, how many more move-ins they have to do to carry the same amount of occupancy growth across that market. So, but what's interesting more specifically to your question, we're finding that units are getting bigger again, with more businesses that are coming back through the market. So we're actually finding it creeping up with that percentage shifting. So we track every move, and we get a very clear understanding of what the use of that product is, be it from a residential perspective and through multiple subsets there, or from a commercial perspective. And it's really interesting to see as that number creeps up from a commercial perspective, how the unit size is creeping up and how the churn is starting to reduce. So length of stay up, resilience to rate increases going up, and all of that sort of becoming more profitable, and effectively needing to reduce our inquiries, because we don't need more inquiries than we need. It's a set number that we need. We're able to reduce our inquiries, save marketing spend, and run our facilities more efficiently, still carrying away to occupancy of 95%. So it's just interesting to see the role that those active users are playing in the self-storage space, and effectively how we respond to it.
That's great. Very well said. Wow. Kind of keeping it going, John.
I would say to that one, Chris, I think that's interesting, but I think, so the way we look at it now, we operate in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Singapore. In Taiwan, we're 30 square foot units average. In Hong Kong, we are 16 square foot units average. In Singapore, we are 40 square foot unit average. All of those is a lot smaller than you find in the rest of the world. But it is, we typically look at it as for the storage product, it's like a 5% extension of your home. Like if your average home size is 1,000 square foot, then your average unit size is maybe around 50 square feet. Houses are bigger where you are. Houses are bigger in America, and storage units are bigger. In Asia, people live in tiny spaces. So storage spaces are also really small.
No, Jess, that's a great point. And understanding that market, I mean, each market will unquestionably have its own nuances. When I'm doing these comparisons, I'm looking at very similar household sizes. When looking at those comparisons, I'm sitting in a facility at the moment, which is 220,000 square feet across 1,300 units, massive unit size. So it's a really, really big facility. But it's an historic facility that's sitting with a significant business occupancy. We would never be able to keep this facility full if we were just targeting, residential users. So I guess every market.
I think the other point we look at is then storage duration. And a lot what we do is we do the really small units are like house extension types. Like it's like an ongoing commitment, like your suitcases and your sports gear and whatnot. They're really small unit sizes, but it's like a storeroom away from home, where the bigger rooms then go to like house renovation or house move type situation. But they're a lot more temporary in nature, right? So it's like a 6-8 months engagement, where your extension from home is typically like 24 months, right? So yeah, of course, you need to rent out more units, but once you rent them, the small units, they stay forever. And then you go to the really big ones, which are business units. And again, they stay for a long time. So you got to find the good sort of, okay, what's my perfect unit mix? And like they say, right, every time you try, you get it wrong. You just don't know how wrong you get it.
Yes, we've even got facilities that are maybe 3 kilometers from each other with significantly different unit mixes, just based on the exact location and the nuances between those facilities. One might have an 80% residential occupancy, the other one might have a 50 or 45% residential occupancy, just about where it's located. So even in the same city, a couple of roads apart, just with the way it flows, you'll find those interesting nuances coming through. But all good points. Yeah.
So that actually was my next question too, about just demand drivers. And this is a really hard question because it's a micro market industry, but as a whole, kind of, what do you think is the biggest demand driver in your region?
I mean, I think in the States, Allison, the biggest shift we've seen obviously through COVID is the work from home. That's been the newest, impact is people are, through COVID, one of two things happen. One, you have either downsized, maybe you're renting instead of owning now, maybe you lost your job, maybe you have to move for a new one, or two, maybe you're in a fortunate enough position, you say, well, I'm working from home, finally I'm going to take care of my kitchen remodel project, or maybe I'm going to move to my beach house or somewhere, I need to set up a home office there. So that's been the biggest new shift in that. And I think through that, we've set some new permanent trends. As you mentioned, you take most of your calls from home now. So, I think we're starting to see people who are now permanently from home or permanently remote. And with that comes this new phase of life. And maybe they did clear out that extra bedroom and it's going to stay that way. And so now that storage unit is an extension of their home, as Jess mentioned in Singapore. Or maybe, their office closed and so they're running their business out of their unit, like Chris mentioned. So I think we're going to see this continued trend to some degree. But obviously outside of that, as we touched on earlier, the death, divorce, downsizes of the world tend to continue to push this storage industry. But I think now, again, the COVID drivers and then all of the population migration across the US to the better states in the US, Texas and Florida and everything in between, we're seeing a lot of population growth in those major markets, which will continue to fuel storage for quite some time.
John McGlynn,
Yeah, sorry, John, are you seeing the size of houses in the States reducing, or are they maintaining a large size? Because in Australia, we're seeing the actual size of dwellings reduce and the emergence of a lot of townhouses and apartments, which has given rise to people needing storage in Australia because the floor plates where they're living are so much smaller now compared to what they were 10 years ago. I'd be interested to hear what's happening in the States and around the globe in regard to that.
Yeah, I think anecdotally, like even here in my hometown, there are a number of very high-end, Class A country club neighborhoods that were 20 minutes outside town that used to be very highly desired. I think we've seen an urbanization shift across the US anyway, but specifically here, we've seen it. Those country club neighborhoods, no one wants to be there anymore. They don't want to be 20 minutes from the coffee shop and the restaurants and the bar and the school. I think we're seeing a major shift in convenience here in the United States. You've seen it from people utilizing Uber Eats for everything to wanting to walk or bike ride. And now that a lot of people work from home, they say, I want to be near everything. They want to be near everything they want in their daily lives, including kids' schools. And that's not being 20 minutes outside of town. I think more now than ever, we value our time, and being in the 6,000 square foot house 30 minutes from town doesn't really do it anymore. And like even now here in town, we've built a number of micro unit apartments. The average condo size has gone down. The average home size has gone down. So yes, I think that trend is carrying a lot of ways. And again, that further pushes the need for storage. My own mother she sold our childhood house recently, moved into an apartment about the quarter size of what she used to move in. And guess what? She's renting a 10 by 20 at a public storage. So I don't see that unit going anywhere for the next 18 months. So we are victims of our own industry.
I completely echo your sentiments, though. I mean, my bubble gets increasingly smaller and smaller. I totally value convenience. And when I found out that there was wine delivery, the second part of my life began. Like that is, I just don't have to leave. This is amazing. Alan, sorry, you were going to say something too.
Pre and post wine. That's a nice date in the sand, Allison.
Yeah, look,
my heart.
Australia is very much convenience driven. I mean, we've seen these nodes set up. So originally we had our major capital cities such as Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, etc., and they were the main towns. And then as our metropolitan areas have further developed, we've got these sub nodes within them that have drawn their own demand, and they've become little micro cities of themselves. So where we used to look at and say we had these outer suburbs that were, say, 15, 20 kilometres away from the CBD and 30 and 40 and 50 kilometres away from the CBD, all of a sudden they've created their own demand and then their own activity centres and their own nodes. And what's happened is we've seen tremendous demand for walk-up storage in those centres. And of course, there isn't the supply of land, just like I'm hearing all around the globe. It's the challenge is the barrier to entry is finding the site, and finding the site that you can work the feasibility on. I mean, our land values here, for example, range sort of regionally, you can pay $70 a square metre for an industrial site that someone would go and put on a drive-up facility that might have a population around it of, say, 20,000 people. You come into the CBD paying $25,000 per square metre for that same site. And it's costing you about $3,000 a square metre by the time you've got your walk-up facility constructed and completed. So the barriers to entry over here in Australia are quite substantial, really, when you come into our A-grade markets.
What about you, Chris?
I mean, I genuinely think that the life-changing events will carry us. So the different stages of life-changing events that people go through, be it the initial ones, we sort of break them into sort of 7 brackets, but as early as the students, and all the way through to that final life change that John was referring to a bit earlier, and that final downsizing. I believe that's going to continue. So people will continue to move home, they will continue to shift, and then from the life-changing events of businesses will also continue. So new businesses will start, businesses will continue to grow. And then I guess from an e-com perspective, South Africa is a bit behind the US and the UK. But the reality there is that we are seeing many businesses that don't need that retail interface of yesteryear. So they don't need to go open a shop on the high street to start their brand. They don't need it anymore. They've got a digital interface. So effectively, we must play our role in that cycle by creating space for them to grow those businesses. And I believe that's a significant opportunity for us over the short to medium term, is to just develop that last mile sort of e-tailing space, and you know, how our businesses, our buildings are going to respond to that. You know, we've got a few ideas, but time will tell. But yeah, we're quite excited for the foreseeable future. You really are in a good place from a self-storage perspective. I think we all sat 3.5 years ago saying, I wonder if people are going to be able to pay their bills. And you realize that the most important things that they have are quite often in their storage unit. And we unfortunately had a tragedy in one of our stores in South Africa where we had a burn down of 1,000 units based on riots, and a really complicated situation it was. But you know, being on the ground myself a few days after the event and talking to maybe hundreds of customers, you don't realize that the fridge and the bed don't mean much. It's the photos and the medals that mean everything. And the value of the goods that are inside storage units are often much higher than we actually understand, because we look at it from a monetary perspective. So I believe there'll always be a place for us, and in that space. Yeah.
John McGlynn, what do you think are biggest demand drivers? And again, you know, obviously it's a micro market industry, but as a whole, what do you think?
I can't really disagree with anything that's already been said. I think the major drivers are going to continue. Where I think there's going to be more changes / disruption is in the business space, because of the work from home stuff, but not even that. I just think there's so many companies now, through necessity of inflation and price inflation, are going to have more flexibility. There is nothing more flexible than, you know, a storage facility or you know, with flexible workspace. I think the industry, new facilities will be more towards our model of having, you know, storage and flexible working. That's just the trend that we see. I mean, we're firing ahead. We've got 3 deals in legals as we speak. So for us, it's full steam ahead. On the unit sizes, again, I agree with everything that's been said, but the mean Scotsman in me, I would rather tend towards smaller units, because it's much easier to give somebody who wants 50 225s than give somebody who wants 25 or 50. So, you know, someone very wise told me, you sell what you have. He's in Singapore. We listen very carefully to the wise words of Jess Johansen when he speaks.
Yeah. Only when he's had a glass of wine, mate, then he comes.
Well, when I'm around, there's no chance of anyone not having a glass of wine in their hand.
I knew we were going to get along. This is great. Before we close out, is there anything that you want to add, John McGlynn? Let's kind of start with you.
No, I think it's been great fun. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks to everyone else for joining in. It's been fascinating just to get a real snapshot of what's happening around the world of global self-storage.
I agree.
I couldn't agree more. This has been awesome to see what's going on. And I, for one, am very excited to see everyone in person again at some point this year. Chris, I saw you in London 2019 last time. John and Jess, Shanghai 2019, I think. Alan, we're coming to Melbourne this year, so saddle up. It's gonna be a busy year. Looking forward to finally getting back to the new norm and seeing where storage takes us all.
Hopefully we'll get the Asia conference dates out soon, and that's handy for everyone to get to, and it's always incredibly good fun too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be here in Singapore. I think, you know, China and Hong Kong is still struggling massively with COVID and restrictions there, but the rest of Asia seems to be happening. And certainly Singapore is easy to go in and out of now. I was in Australia last month. I was in Thailand last week, and you know, so it's easy to get in. It's great.
Yeah. No, well, look, thanks for inviting me. It's just been fascinating listening to all the perspectives from the world, and it seems as though it doesn't matter where you go. We've all got very similar challenges in our marketplaces and very similar drivers. So it's been really enlightening. So thanks, team.
Yeah,
thanks
thank you
guys.
for me. And John, Lindsey, have a good honeymoon.
Yeah, John.
You're off somewhere, so you know,
Thanks,
congratulations, and you know, do the things you need to do on honeymoon. We don't want to.
You guys will all get to meet Mrs. Lindsey at the next storage conference, which sounds like it's going to be in Singapore. So we'll look forward to it.
Great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks, Allison. We appreciate
Yeah, thank
it.
you guys so much for joining. Everybody, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, give me a call, 248-795-8126, or shoot me an email, Allison, ALISON @listselfstorage.com. Thank you.
Cheers, guys.